when people support everything that I'm doing and also seeing other people doing amazing things, it also motivates me to kind of excellate in a way to make things a lot bigger. And with that, I strive to support women businesses, people, or whatever in all those shape or form ways to make sure that everyone has the resources they need to strive and make sure they feel empowered and know what they want to be in the future.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On each episode of Oh My Curry Goodness, I talk to people across different industries, primarily those who are Gen Z, about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. My goal for this podcast is to understand the behind the scenes part of a person rather than focusing on the destinations people have reached. Because these behind the scenes stories are some of the things that make us human beings. And so let's talk about the good and bad experiences because these are the things that have shaped us into who we are today. Now, before I continue on, I do want to note that this is the last episode of season two because I have decided after some time to take a long hiatus from the podcast. It was a difficult decision because I love interacting with people, but I really want to figure out how to be a better podcaster going forward. It felt like the conversations I had, or maybe the questions I asked, were not unique or good enough. Maybe that's just me being hard on myself, but I really want to be a great conversationalist, and I hope that this hiatus will help me become that better, or give me a chance to figure out what went wrong and how to be a better communicator and hopefully develop really good content in the future. So continue to check back or continue to follow the podcast. Be sure to check out past episodes. You might cringe a little bit, but nevertheless, and anyone can tell you when it comes to podcasting, it can be a work in progress. But I hope you guys continue to support it, and I hope to see you guys hopefully in the spring. That's my goal. But, anyways, with all that being said, let's talk about my guest this week because I am speaking. Who knew that my final guest for some time would be a fellow podcaster? My guest this week is Kylie Montingey, who is the founder of Empower Girls and the host of the podcast Talk of Fame. This podcast features guests discussing topics such as mental health and people's journeys. Why is that somewhat similar? Because that's something that I do on my podcast, and I actually happen to be a guest on her show. So I'm really excited to speak to Kylie once again and just learn about her story. So, Kylie Montigny, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness.
Thank you for having me. It's great to chat with you again.
Yeah, so it's interesting because for those of you who don't know, I was actually a guest on your podcast. I believe it was December of
Mm,
2023, and it was a great conversation I had with you because you're someone who loves sports and
mm.
loves interacting and getting to learn about people. So I was like, you know what, you should be a guest on my show. Um, So yeah, I mean, there was so much that I enjoyed, and I don't know, like I guess to start off, I am taking a long hiatus from the podcast, and tell me a bit about, I guess, the relationship you have. I guess I want to start off by talking about maybe the relationship you have with your podcast, because as I said, that it can be a work in progress. I can sometimes, in extreme cases, equivalent to like a marriage of some sort because husbands and wives always get into fights, but at the end of the day, they're always like with each other. Well, there are cases where there are bad relationships, but for the most part, they stick together. And I'm wondering, I know that's kind of, I know we're not talking about relationships, but I guess talk about relationship you have with your own podcast.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been doing this for 3 years, so doing each episode is always a different relationship, honestly. There's always good and bad, as you know. But the relationship I really have is very meaningful. I didn't really expect to do this podcast Talk of Fame for 3 years. I thought it was something I was gonna do for maybe a year or so until the pandemic was over to keep me busy. I didn't think I was gonna do it for like 3 years. But Talk of Fame has really been such a meaningful. part of my life since I started. I didn't really expect it to be as big and meaningful to me as, when I started this podcast. But, this podcast has really been such a great way to kind of express myself, meet new people, and have meaningful conversations. That's really what I love about life is meeting new people from different states. I know you're from Ohio and I'm a Pennsylvania native. So, connecting with, sister states in a way is very exciting. So really having meaningful conversations with people from different parts of the US or different countries is something that I didn't expect. But, podcasting has always been my first love in a way. But, having these conversations and meeting new people has always been such a blast, even though the editing part and everything is not always the greatest.
It can definitely be a pain when it comes to editing. I'm someone who has said many times that I hate the sound of my own voice, but sometimes we've got to do these things because we want to deliver the best content possible. And yeah, it can be scary interacting with people, or not scary, but maybe definitely those first few moments of interacting with someone can be nervous or can be a nerve-wracking experience because you have never met them. And then there's also this thing that you've been taught when you were little that, stay away from strangers. But then, while that can be the case, there are definitely ways where meeting someone for the first time can be a meaningful experience. So I'm glad
Mhm.
that we have something in common. Now, before we do talk about your podcast, I want to touch on something else that you and I have a passion for, which is sports.
Mhm.
Now, spoiler alert, me and Kylie are not professional athletes, but we do love different sports. I think you can definitely elaborate on the sports you enjoy. I'm
Mhm.
someone who's a big soccer fan, but even though we're not professional athletes, I guess talk about what sports means to you personally, because I equivalate it as like your own version of therapy, if you will, where you can always have a bad day, but there's something about watching your favorite sports team that, it doesn't matter who the person on your left or the right, like what they think, the fact that they all share the same belief that they want to see their favorite team win. That's kind of how I see what sports means to me, is that shared belief that we just want to support our favorite team and beat whoever they're playing. Is that how you see sports, or what does that mean to you personally?
Yeah, I see it the exact same way. I grew up around sports. My brother played baseball, basketball, and I grew up playing basketball, baseball, swimming. So I grew up all around sports. My family's a big, gigantic sports fans like Penn State, Phillies, and everything. And being from Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is a really big sports team state. So, living in Pennsylvania is always fun in terms of sports, where it's football, baseball, hockey. It's always very fun. But to go back to answering your question, was up around sports, I didn't really love it as much as I did now. I kind of just watch sports. It's because my family loves sports. But as I grew up, it became my life. I Every single day I watch something sports. Maybe it's football, baseball, hockey, whatever it is. I'm not really a hockey fan, but I'll just watch it for the sake of it, so I have something to watch. But sports is honestly my personality. If you know me personally, especially baseball, I'm a Dodger fan. And, with them in the World Series right now, I am nervous and excited at the same time. It's gonna be a great series. But, with this series, I am nervous. But, with baseball, it's my entire personality. And if you are watching a game with me, you would know that I would scream and yell at the TV, acting like the players see me saying stuff. And that's something that you'll hear a lot from me and my family, screaming at the TV, acting like the players are right there. But sports is honestly a great way for me to kind of express myself and something therapeutic if I'm having a long day, whether it's working, doing podcast episodes, school. I'm a senior in high school right now. So, as part of that process is definitely a lot. So doing sports and really listening to sports or watching on TV is definitely something that gives me something to watch and kind of let alone not think about what happened that day. To kind of see my favorite sports team play is something that excites me and kind of gives me in a different zone, if you will.
I'm curious to know about this because sometimes it could come off as immature or childish, but maybe there could be more to something than what's already seen. But is there a team, and you may have mentioned because you obviously talked about how you're a big fan of the Dodgers, the LA Dodgers. Is there a team, or would you consider that team to be a team you've connected with on a more personal or emotional level? Meaning, like, it's not just a sports team that you're a huge fan of, but it's almost like a sense, like, I don't want to say it's like your second family, but it's like, it almost feels like it's like your best friend in a way, or like, I don't know, but there's like an emotional connection you have where like most people would just see it as, oh yeah, I love watching this team or love watching this particular sport. But there's this thing where, and I don't know how to say it, but it's like you love this team so much that you're so emotionally connected, and it sometimes feels like it is your best friend in a way. I know I kind of just contradicted myself, but do you kind of get where I'm going with this? Where it's like
Yeah.
there's that, like, yeah, okay, you guys love this team, but there's like, no, this is like my best friend. I want to make sure that it does well on this particular day.
Yeah, the Dodgers are like that for me. For the last few years, it's kind of been an emotional roller coaster. Whether they win in the World Series or lose in a playoff game or something, it definitely impacts my personality. I remember when I was at a concert like 2 weeks ago, I was literally like it was like the game five of Mets and Dodgers. I was literally watching a concert and had my phone in front of me watching the game. Basically just watching the game and having my father message me the update since I couldn't watch on TV. Just so I can keep myself updated because I was like, I can't go to this concert without knowing what the Dodgers are doing right now. So like the Dodgers are really just a great way for me to kind of like feel something different than myself because I met so many Dodger fans and people on social media and in person over the last couple of years, and all the fans that I personally met are honestly amazing. And it's something that I didn't realize how much it would impact me until like the pandemic, really. And with that, it really plays such a big role in how much I loved baseball because I grew up baseball fields like every single day. So, I have to love baseball if I'm there every single day. And with that, the Dodgers really did play such a big role in watching maybe highlights of the games if I had work and couldn't watch it, or this whatever it may be, it did play such a big role in acting like, oh, I'm screaming at my brother playing baseball in a way because my brother still plays high school baseball. So it really feels like I'm really yelling at my brother, but a far distance. But it really did play such a big role in, how much I love sports. And the Dodgers really played a big role in that. And it feels like I know all the players, even though I didn't meet them in a way. I met some of them, but not all of them. But it really did play such a big role in kind of how I live every single day and everything. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that answers it. It's funny because it's something that maybe not everyone will understand because it's like, why are you such a huge fan of this thing? But like, I'm a huge Columbus Crew fan. We have our own soccer team, and they're called in Columbus, Ohio, and they're called Columbus Crew. And I'm someone that would be like, okay, I might be at an event, but I'm also like, okay, what's happening? Are they winning? Are they losing? Did someone score yet? So I can definitely feel that enthusiasm or share that enthusiasm with you, or at least relate to it. Sorry, I can't figure out the right terminology, but yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Now, sports is obviously one thing that's important to you, but another thing that is also important is the idea of female empowerment.
Mhm.
And I'm curious to know, like, first of all, like why is that such an important part of your mission? Because what's interesting about you, and I guess where I was trying to go with this is that you are a senior in high school and you already have that this is one of, if not your biggest mission, is to empower women to realize that there's more that they're capable of doing than what they are told to do. And even though you're 18, this is something that you are very passionate about, which is, while as I'm sure there are many people, maybe they're still trying to figure out their purpose and their mission. That's obviously a different conversation, but for you, why is female empowerment important to you personally?
Yeah, because when I was growing up, I really didn't see myself on television. I never knew what I wanted to do as a career when I went to college until I was probably like in sophomore, junior in high school. It really took a while for me to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And as time went on, I just didn't see myself as a person on television. And when I realized that there's not a lot of female representation on television and children's media, I realized that I wanted to do something. I wanted to kind of talk about those things and talk to other people about what they experience and feel like I wasn't alone in that situation because I didn't know like more female characters are less than male characters was a thing until I saw like some research. And with that, like I once I started my podcast, I knew that I wanted it to kind of be a part of my mission to have a lot of female guests on. Just so I can just connect with them on these type of topics. And once I started having these conversations, I felt less alone that people are also doing amazing things to help end this subject. And I recently did a TED talk, which is, I don't know if it's going to be released or not once this episode is out, but it was about women empowerment in media. And that experience was absolutely amazing. I loved it. If it's out, make sure to stay tuned to my socials and everything like that. And what's with that, like ever since I started advocating for that, everyone's been doing like saying amazing things about it. And with that, like when people support everything that I'm doing and also seeing other people doing amazing things, it also motivates me to kind of excellate in a way to make things a lot bigger. And with that, I strive to support women businesses, people, or whatever, in all those shape or form ways to make sure that everyone has the resources they need to strive and make sure they feel empowered and know what they want to be in the future.
Now, I know that you're not the only woman in the world, and so this is obviously can be a ridiculous question, but when it comes to when it comes to empowering people, I've asked this a lot when it comes to whether it's empower like when it comes to like putting a good image on people of color, a different background, different race. I know, or I mean, different gender, whatever that may be. I've had different guests that um, have when it comes to like empowering a certain group of people. I want to ask you, like, how much pressure do you put on yourself in terms of being the best when it comes to being in this field of women empowerment? Because, like I said, I know that's a ridiculous statement to make. You're not the only woman in the world, but there are many women in the world that have a mission of female empowerment. But given that you are playing a role in such an important movement, do you feel like there is pressure you put on yourself when it comes to being the best version in hopes of getting more people, whether it's more women or men or others, to really emphasize the importance of women and seeing the potential that they have?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like anyone advocating for these type of things are some sort of feeling like that, of course. But as time went on and I got more deeply involved, I feel like at certain points in my life where I feel like I'm not doing much in a way than certain people, and that's perfectly fine. Everyone's schedules is different. Everyone is kind of approaching it in a different way. But sometimes I oftentimes feel like I'm not doing much. And that's okay as long as I am doing my best in this shape or form, then that's the most important thing to me. But there's always some sort of pressure I feel in terms of that, of course. But I always strive to find things to advocate for women empowerment, whether it's through podcasting, book drives, supporting causes, or what. It really plays a big role in what I do, but sometimes I at least feel a lot of pressure in what I do and kind of find different ways to approach it. It definitely plays a big role.
For sure. And I know that obviously I'm sure there are many people that will tell you, Kylie, you don't need to put too much pressure on yourself because you're only 18 and all this kind of stuff. But I am it's also good to see that you want to be the best. And I don't know, like I guess we did talk about the relationship you have with podcasting, but also when it comes to advocating or for female empowerment, I guess maybe from like a more personal level, what kind of relationship do you have with yourself in that field? Because activism or empowerment can be a difficult journey. I would argue it's obviously way more difficult than podcasting. When it comes to, I guess, failed, like when there was an objective you had and you failed or you didn't get what you want, what what's the relationship like in that aspect? Are you more hard on yourself than it comes to when it comes to podcasting? Is it more equal? Or talk to me about the relationship when it comes to the activism part of you.
Yeah, so I feel like it's a lot harder than podcasting for sure, just because it's on a different level. With that, like whenever I'm doing work with other ladies doing things, I do feel more empowered by other women doing amazing things. But whenever something doesn't play out, it does hurt a lot, and I feel down on myself and don't feel too good. But then after a few days, I'm actually in a better mindset than I was. I actually think like, okay, things happen for a reason. Like, what are different ways I could to leverage this because it didn't work out? But it really plays such a different role than maybe podcasting what is. Because you record stuff for podcasting, but this you can just do it in different ways, whether it's hosting a podcast about this subject or what, you can do it many different ways. But my love for women empowerment and podcasting are kind of like similar in a way because I love both like the same way. But with that, I feel like I feel more connected to people if I talk about this subject, if they feel the exact same way. But these two subjects are also very powerful in a way, but they do play such a big part of my life, and I can't choose a favorite just because they're both amazing. But they both play such a really massive role in other people's lives and make sure to advocate for this. I know it plays a big way in empowering myself and finding a better way to do that, but it does play a much deeper role than what it shows out to be.
You mentioned how podcasting and women empowerment are important to you. Obviously, sports is also important to you as well. There's something else that you're also passionate about, and I mentioned it a little bit in the introduction, which is mental health. And one of the things that you have shared on your own podcast and also in previous interviews is you opened up about issues such as anxiety and depression. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, I don't want to go too further into this unless you are comfortable with it because these are very difficult topics. But
Mhm.
I think the challenge about these two particular topics is when young people talk about it in particular, because if I'm looking at, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're 18 years old. An
Mhm.
18-year-old's experiences will obviously be different from someone who's 36, 40, 50 years old. So from a broad sense, what is it like talking about these experiences? And more specifically, number one, are there times where you question whether it's right to talk about this because you're only 18 and people might think that you're equating this to bad mood? And then secondly, the fact that you are revisiting difficult experiences that you had in your life, and that can be a difficult thing given the magnitude of those experiences.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard for anyone, no matter how old they are, to talk about these subjects. I had anxiety since I was born, basically. So I had to deal with this for 18 years. So it's nothing new. But at first, when I started podcasting, it was honestly very hard to talk about because I didn't want to feel like judged in a way, just because I just like because everyone deals with mental health differently. And I don't want people judging me based off of what I've dealt with personally. Because oftentimes I want people to see me in a different way, not just for my experiences with mental health in a way. So, like at first, it was very hard to kind of talk about it, but as time went on, I've realized that like a lot of people, basically, maybe not everyone, but most people deal with mental health issues, whether it's anxiety or depression. Even after the pandemic, it really grew. And with that, I became more comfortable talking about it just because a lot of people need to hear that people do or experience the same exact thing. And at first, I wanted to hear someone talk about it just because I just didn't want to feel alone or have some confidence in talking about it. But I did find some people talking about it, and I was like, I want to ha talk about it, even if it might seem very hard. And with that, anxiety and depression and mental health became less harder talking about it as time went on. And pe people started reaching out and was like, I really dealt with the exact same thing as you. You're not alone. And that makes me feel more empowered to talk about is because people are reaching out and hearing their stories motivates me to do better. It makes me feel not alone. So that kind of what strives me to do what like talking about each episode. But at first it was honestly very hard to talk about these subjects.
Is there one of the things that I don't know why I just said one of the things. I just said that 5 times already on this podcast. But do you feel like when it comes to talking about your experiences, I think from on a broad scale, and I think you can also agree with this as well, that when it comes to sharing your authentic self or doing something that you're very passionate about, not everyone will be supportive. Not supportive in the sense of like downright hate, but maybe they just won't agree with the overall message. And so it can be difficult in these cases, but do you feel like when it comes to opening up about anxiety, depression, mental health, whether it's with yourself or with some of your guests, do you feel like you are at peace at knowing that not everyone will be supporting that message? Because I've had guests when it comes to like some sort of activism or for whether it's like a political situation or about empowerment situation, some people are at peace at knowing that not everyone will support them. I think I've had a couple of guests that have admitted that they're not at peace because they still want, because given the magnitude of the situation, they want everyone to be involved. And so, as an 18-year-old, I'm sure that there are people that may have told you no, may not support your cause or your mission. Are you at peace with that, or do you still feel like there is a part of you that's like, I wish there were still people that are wondering whether I'm good enough, or I want to do everything I can to make sure that everyone likes me, regardless of who they are.
Like honestly, like to be completely honest with you, I'm still kind of not at peace with that. It's because I am the type of pe person that likes to people please. So I'm just like, whenever people don't support me or what I do, I feel some sort of hate or hatred towards that for some reason. But with that, I feel like that's the way with everyone because everyone kind of wants everyone to support them and whether it's their work themselves or whatever, everyone wants people to support their cause or their person, even though there might be family or friends that might support their cause or them. It doesn't mean that they have the same views as them, even though they're a family member. That's perfectly fine. And I've realized that even though people are best as of friends or family members, not everyone agrees with you on certain subjects. And that's what I realized over the last couple of years is that not everyone's going to agree with you no matter what. And that's something that I had to learn the hard way rather than the easy way, of course. But not everyone's going to agree with you, and that's something that I'm still trying to figure out in a way. But as time goes on, it really I will find the process to actually find peace with it. But whenever people don't agree with it or don't like me because of this certain reason, I'm just like, why? Like, why? What did I do to you? But I feel like everyone just deals with that in a way, and it takes honestly a long time to actually find peace with that.
Before we talk about, before we go back to your podcast, Talk of Fame, I do want to ask you another mental health related question because you do focus on empowerment, and one of the things that you do talk about is the fact that you feel like you think that there are a lot of people that focus, you feel like everyone has potential regardless of who they are and what their abilities are. And I'm wondering, because I think potential is a really interesting word, which is that there is so much that a person can offer, and either maybe they just need more time, or obviously, like I think you and I can both agree that everyone is a work in progress, regardless of what they're pursuing. But was there ever a time where, especially when you were talking about your experiences with anxiety or depression, or any difficult challenges you had, whether it's personally, your female empowerment, or podcasting in general, was there ever a time where you felt that you didn't have potential, where you were just like, what if I'm not good enough? I know that's a deep question, but given that potential, the word potential is so important to you, was there ever a time where you were like, I don't know if I have potential personally?
Of course. I mean, I feel like everyone deals with that in a way, whether in their careers or whatever. But sometimes I'm honestly very hard on myself no matter what I'm doing. Just because I kind of want to be perfect in a way. Just because I just like I want to be a different version of myself than outside of this. And I feel like whenever I didn't do great in an episode or a job or something, I'm always very hard on myself no matter what. And I'm always beating myself up for it, even though I probably shouldn't, and that's okay. Just because, like, even if you did horrible during an episode or something, like you learned what happened. You learned some sort of information from this episode that you probably should have done. And that's something that you shouldn't do in future episodes. And that is okay. Everyone is a work in progress. Not everyone's going to be perfect. And with that, every situation that you're doing is honestly a learning progress. And with that, even though I've been doing podcasting for 3 years, I still have moments where I'm like, I am not perfect. This episode is horrible. Why am I still doing this? But oftentimes, I'm like, I've been doing this for 3 years. I love it so much. Even though I done horribly this episode, I could do absolutely great in the next episode. So doing with that motivation, it really does play a big role in kind of finding more motivation, but it's honestly very hard depending on the day and episode. But really, oftentimes I play hard to get on episodes just because I'm just like I want to be perfect and strive to do better. And at 3 years in, it really still plays a big part. Of course, I don't know everything. I'm still trying to learn in different ways. But of course, I'm still very hard on myself no matter what. But that's absolutely normal. And I rather be hard on myself than being absolutely perfect in each episode and being horrible.
Yeah, and that's actually how I want to transition, which is obviously your podcast. And you may have talked about this throughout the conversation, but I think one of the things I want to do going forward is being more free on a podcast. And when I say free, I don't mean like free in terms of availability. That's not what I mean. But free in terms of letting go of expectations. And so when it comes to bringing a certain guest, I do worry about what will the guest think, or what will potential guests think. And so it's so easy to think about other things other than the present moment and just being, I guess, in a way, grateful that certain people have or people have taken time out of the day to join Oh My Curry Goodness. With your podcast, Talk of Fame, do you feel like you are quote unquote free in the sense that you let go of expectations of guests, potential guests, or other people, or do you still feel like that's a work in progress because of the fact, like you said, that sometimes you worry about perfectionism, that you are hard on yourself because you want to be the best version of you. And so it can be hard to let go of expectations because either people don't know us or people just want to see good content at the end of the day.
Like I honestly still deal with that on a daily basis. I do interviews like 10 times a week, so I do it very often. But with that, like I'm still like feel like I'm perfect in a way just because I've been doing it for so long, but it's like with that, like I'm still like trying to figure out what I'm doing, even though I am not perfect. It honestly depends on the guest and who I'm talking to plays a role in it too. Whenever I'm talking to like a big person, I do feel like I am like, okay, am I that good? Or like I feel some sort of like confidence. But whenever something happens, I do absolutely horrible, or the guest didn't do that good in answering the questions I had, it really feels like, oh, did I ask the right questions? Did I play a big role in that? And that is something that bothers me a lot is that, like, did I do well? And was it just a guess? And with that, it really plays a big role in everyday life, but it really strives me to do better in a way. But no matter what, I'm always like I'm trying to be perfect every single day. And I know people oftentimes say no one's perfect, and I say that like statement too every single day to people. And with that, even though I am always saying I'm trying to be perfect, no one's perfect in every way. No matter if you're Joe Rogan, for crying out loud, you're still not perfect. No one's going to be Joe Rogan, even though you're Joe Rogan, he still has bad days. And with that motivates me to kind of like be like, even if I had a bad episode, I'm still not perfect as Joe Rogan. That's what motivates me. But even though I'm not Joe Rogan, I'm nowhere towards Joe Rogan or how famous he is. Like, you are perfect in your own way, no matter what.
For sure. Now, I know this will be dependent on the particular guest. So obviously there is a gray area in this, but I would love to know because you talked about how there are times where you can be hard on yourself. How would you know if an episode, this is like a personal question, because every podcaster thinks differently. What in terms of Kylie's definition or Kylie's words, how would you what's the difference between a good podcast episode and a bad podcast episode from your
Yeah,
personal
so
opinion?
for me, a good podcast episodes honestly there's kind of like more conversation than anything. And that mean the guests are getting along, like they're giving good in-depth interviews, questions, and information. That's what kind of defines it for me is that like they're actually interacting, talking more than answering questions and not really saying anything. And for a bad podcast episode, oh, I can go on about this one. But this one for me is honestly this giving one word answers, not really saying anything, not really interacting, seems like they don't want to be here. They just kind of give no interest, not trying to get to know you, not trying to like do anything. I've dealt with this a lot and it happens, I'm sure for you as well, but that's kind of what I see very often and it literally kills me.
No, that's I'm not I mean, I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything on that because there could be someone listening and being like, are they talking about me? But no, it's definitely yeah, it can definitely be an up and down experience, but I'm glad that we have that in common. Before I let you go, I do want to talk about one more thing about your podcast, and then I want to wrap everything up, which is that, given that your podcast means a lot to you, I, I've this is a question I've asked this question when it comes to, I guess, like obviously, Talk of Fame is not like the most important part of your identity. There's obviously many things about you, but if you were to quit Talk of Fame tomorrow, what would, and I'm not promoting you to quit by any means. I've listened
I
to your
know,
episodes and
yeah.
it's great. But if you were to quit Talk of Fame tomorrow, what would life look like for you personally?
It would probably be boring, honestly. It probably wouldn't be entertaining just because like I love having these conversations and I do this like every single day depending on like how my schedule works. But honestly, if I were to quit Taco Bell tomorrow, my life would be so boring. I would probably be depressed, not talking to anyone. Honestly, that would probably be life for me, honestly, just because I'm just like, it's literally my everyday life and it's honestly what keeps me going. But with that, I honestly don't know. Like, I don't know if I would do something new in my career or what, but I honestly never thought of it, honestly, since you got asked that question. But honestly, if I were to ask right now and think about it, I'd probably be depressed and just do school. That's probably the only things I would do, if
No,
I'm
that's
being honest.
That's interesting. Well, I hope you don't quit because it is a great podcast. So keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Um,
At least someone thinks so. I'm very happy you like it.
last question before I let you go. Obviously, my podcast focuses on what it's like to be a particular person. And obviously, there are the good days that can be seen on social media or other platforms. But there are also difficult days that we usually don't talk about as much because we don't usually have the platform to, or maybe because we're just not comfortable sharing. But obviously, I'm not going to force you to say something that you're not comfortable talking about, but one of my favorite signature questions to ask people to end season two of Oh My Curry Goodness is What is the hardest thing about being you?
I would say, oh my gosh, that's actually a good question. Oh my gosh. I'll probably say just finding time for myself is something that I'm struggling, and I know a lot of people don't oftentimes see because sometimes I'm always going from one thing to another, no matter what. I'm a very busy person, so I'm always going from one thing to another, and honestly, the hardest part is really just managing everything I have going on and actually finding time for myself. Sometimes I love being busy, so I'm not complaining. But like it's hard being struggling everything and actually finding time for myself is something that like kills me. Just because, I love doing what I do, but sometimes I'm honestly sometimes can get very exhausted. And with that, it really get like whenever I'm exhausted or sleep deprived, I get sick. So, whenever that happens, it makes me that's the only time I slow down is when I get sick, just because I'm also sleep deprived and everything. But the more times I feel that way, the more I'm just like, I want to take time for myself. Like, why am I going this crazy? But as much as I love what I do, that's something that, kills me every single day is finding time to work, but also myself and my family and friends at the same time.
Yeah, that's time can be difficult, especially when you have so many things going on. It can be really hard to find time for yourself. So I hope that you continue to, keep up the great work because I know obviously you're doing a lot, but you're doing things for a purpose. So I just want to
Mhm.
say, Kylie, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It's great to finally reconnect after some time. I'm glad that you're in a way, my final guest for season two because there's so much I learned from you when it comes to podcasting or your passion. That yes, there are difficult days, but you can use these difficult days to grow. So thank you so much for joining the podcast, and I hope we can meet in person one day.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. It was so good to catch up with you again, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Now, even though this is the last episode before I go on a hiatus, I encourage you to check back on all the previous interviews that are out because there are so many incredible people doing incredible things, particularly those of the Gen Z generation. So go ahead or be sure to check those out, and I hope to see you guys next spring.